The marble floors gleamed under Clara's careful hand. 3 years of invisible work. 3 years of silence in Julian Blake's cold mansion. She had perfected the art of disappearing Clara. His voice cut through the afternoon stillness like broken glass. She looked up from the banister she was polishing to find him standing in the doorway of his office. Perfectly tailored suit, perfectly empty eyes. "Sir, I need you tonight. There's a dinner. Investors. Critical to my company's survival." He didn't look at her as he spoke, studying in his phone instead. "You'll accompany me," Clara's heart stuttered. "I don't understand. I don't have time to find someone suitable." "You'll do. Wear something appropriate. Psst, be silent. Don't embarrass me." His tone was arctic. "This isn't a request." She should have said no. Every instinct screamed to refuse this man who treated her like furniture. But something else stirred inside her. Something hungry and reckless. "What time should I be ready?" 7, and Clara. He finally looked at her, his gaze sharp and assessing. "Remember your place." The restaurant glittered with chandeliers and wealth. Clara's simple black dress felt like armor as she approached the entrance. Julian waited there, impatience carved into his jaw. Finally, he didn't offer his arm. "Go." The word was a shove, not an invitation. Inside, Power sat around a circular table. 5 investors in $1,000 suits. Their eyes tracked Clara with cold curiosity as Julian introduced her with cutting brevity. "This is Clara. She's with me tonight. No last name, no context." "She was an accessory, nothing more, Mr. Lawson." A silver-haired man with intelligent eyes studied her longer than the others. Something flickered in his expression. Recognition, perhaps. Or pity. The dinner began. Clara listened as they discussed numbers, projections, market dominance. Julian performed confidence, but she saw the desperation underneath. His company was bleeding. These men were his last hope. "The third quarter numbers are promising," Julian said smoothly. "We're positioned for aggressive expansion." "At what cost?" Mr. Lawson's question landed like a stone in still water. Julian's smile tightened. "Calculated risk is how empires are built. And who bears those risks?" "Mr. Blake." "Your employees? Your communities?" The table went quiet. Clara felt the shift, the judgment forming in the spaces between words. Mr. Lawson turned to her suddenly. "What do you think, Clara? Does an evening like this impress you?" His tone was patronizing, a test she wasn't supposed to pass. She could feel Julian's warning glare burning into her skin. "Stay silent. Remember your place." But 3 years of invisibility had taught her something. She had been watching, learning, understanding these men better than they understood themselves. Clara met Mr. Lawson's eyes. "Actually, I find it fascinating," she said, her voice steady and clear. "You're all focused on financial projections, but what about the people behind those numbers? Aren't they just as important?" The silence that followed was deafening. Julian's face went white, then red. The other investors stared at her as if she had suddenly materialized from thin air. Mr. Lawson's eyebrows lifted. A slow smile curved his lips. "Interesting perspective," he murmured. And just like that, Clara had crossed a line she could never uncross. Julian's hand clenched around his wine glass so hard she thought it might shatter. The tension at the table coiled tighter. Julian's jaw worked silently as Mr. Lawson leaned forward, genuinely interested now. "Tell me, Clara, since you seem to have thoughts on the matter, what would you prioritize in a successful business?" "I'm sure Clara doesn't actually," Julian started. "Let her speak." Mr. Lawson's words were a command, not a suggestion. Clara felt the weight of every eye. This was her moment to retreat, to apologize, to become invisible again. Instead, something inside her caught fire. Sustainability. Not just environmental, but human. A company built on burned-out employees and abandoned communities isn't successful. It's a house of cards. One of the other investors, a woman with sharp features, nodded slowly. "She's not wrong." Julian's face had gone stone cold. It's easy to have opinions when you don't carry the weight of real decisions. Leadership requires sacrifices some people can't understand. Clara turned to him, and for the first time in 3 years, she truly looked at him. saw past the wealth and power to the frightened man underneath. Maybe those at a distance see things those at the top can't, she said quietly. Maybe that weight you carry blinds you. Mr. Lawson laughed, genuine and surprised. I like her, Blake. Where have you been hiding this one? She's nobody, Julian said, too quickly, too sharp. Just someone who doesn't understand how the real world works. The words hung in the air like poison. Clara felt something crack open inside her chest. Not hurt. Liberation. You're right, she said, standing. Every head turned. I don't understand your world. I don't understand how you can look at people as numbers, how you can measure worth and profit margins. She looked directly at Julian. How you can demand silence from anyone who might challenge your certainty, Clara. His voice was a warning and a threat. Thank you for dinner. Mr. Lawson, she nodded to the investors, ignoring Julian completely. It was illuminating. She walked out. Behind her, she heard Mr. Lawson's voice, warm with approval. Well, that was unexpected. The cold night air hit her like a slap. Clara's hands were shaking. She had just destroyed her job, her stability, everything. But she couldn't bring herself to regret it. The mansion was dark when Julian finally returned hours later. Clara had packed her things, knowing what was coming. His office door slammed open. Get in here now. She walked in calmly, her bag already by the door. What the hell were you thinking? Julian's voice was raw with fury. I brought you to be silent, not to humiliate me in front of the most important investors I've ever met. I answered a question. I gave my honest opinion. Your opinion. He laughed, bitter and cruel. You're a housekeeper, Clara. You clean my floors. You don't get opinions at business dinners. You don't get to speak unless spoken to. You don't get to exist in my world. Each word was designed to cut. 3 years ago, they would have destroyed her. Now, they just made her tired. Then why did you bring me? She asked simply. Because I needed a body. A presence. A silent, forgettable woman who wouldn't cause problems. He stepped closer, his eyes blazing. You had one job. One. And you couldn't even do that right. No, Clara said softly. I couldn't pretend to be invisible anymore. Not even for you. You're fired. Effective immediately. Get out of my house. She had expected it. Had known it was coming. But hearing it still felt like a door closing on her old life. Goodbye, Julian. She turned to leave. Wait. His voice stopped her at the door. When she looked back, something complicated moved across his face. Something almost human. Why did you do it? You knew I'd fire you. You knew you had everything to lose. Clara met his eyes one last time, because I finally realized I had nothing to lose if I lost myself. She walked out and didn't look back. 3 days later, her phone rang. Unknown number, Clara. This is Robert Lawson. I'd like to offer you a position with my firm. When can you start? 6 months transformed Clara into someone she barely recognized in the mirror. Robert Lawson's firm had given her opportunities, yes, but more than that, it had given her a voice. She discovered talents buried under years of forced silence, strategic thinking, negotiation, leadership that didn't require cruelty, the Blake Industries file. Robert dropped it on her desk with a significant look. We're acquiring a controlling interest. Congratulations, you'll be leading the integration team. Claire's hand froze over the folder. Blake Industries. Julian's company? The very same. He's drowning in debt and bad decisions. We're throwing him a lifeline, though I doubt he'll see it that way. Robert studied her carefully. Is that a problem? She should say yes. Should recuse herself. Should do anything but accept this assignment that would put her directly in Julian's path again. No problem at all, she heard herself say. The conference room was all glass and steel. Morning light cutting sharp angles across the table. Clara arrived early, arranging her notes with deliberate calm. She had played this moment in her mind 1,000 times. Imagined his shock, his anger, his regret. The door opened. Julian walked in mid-conversation with his lawyer, expensive suit hanging slightly loose on his frame. He looked thinner, tired, older than his 38 years. Then he saw her. Time stopped. His face went through shock, disbelief, and something darker. Something that might have been pain. "You." The word was barely audible. "Mr. Blake." Clara kept her voice professional, neutral. "Please, have a seat. We have much to discuss regarding the acquisition terms." He sat mechanically, his eyes never leaving her face. The other executives filtered in. Robert entered last, his presence commanding immediate attention. "Shall we begin?" Robert gestured to Clara. She stood, clicked to the first slide, and began the presentation that would reshape Julian's entire world. With every statistic about his company's failures, every recommendation for restructuring, every suggestion that implied his leadership had been inadequate, she felt his stare burning into her. This was power. Real power. And it tasted like ash in her mouth. "Questions?" she asked when she finished. "How did this happen?" Julian's voice was rough, broken. He wasn't asking about the acquisition. Poor financial decisions, alienated partnerships, a leadership style that valued control over collaboration. Clara met his eyes. "Your company was bleeding long before we arrived." "That's not what I'm asking, and you know it." The room went silent. Robert raised an eyebrow but said nothing. "How did my housekeeper end up here?" Julian's laugh was jagged. "How did you go from cleaning my floors to destroying my life?" "I'm not destroying anything, Mr. Blake. I'm trying to save what you built, despite your best efforts to burn it down."
Right.
"Is this payback for firing you?" Clara felt something twist in her chest. Saw the fear in his eyes, the humiliation, the desperate confusion. She had imagined this moment would feel like victory. It just felt hollow. "This is business," she said quietly. "Nothing more." The meeting ended. Executives filed out, leaving Clara gathering her materials. She sensed rather than saw Julian approach, his presence a familiar weight in her periphery. "Clara, wait, please." The please cost him. She could hear it in his voice. She turned. Up close, she could see the shadows under his eyes, the tension in his jaw. He looked like a man barely holding himself together. "I was wrong." The words seemed to hurt him physically. "The way I treated you. The things I said. I was wrong. Yes, you were. I don't expect forgiveness. I need you to know I see it now. What I did to you. What I did to everyone." His hand rose, then fell, helpless. "You were right. That night at the dinner, about everything." Clara felt her carefully constructed armor crack. This broken man in front of her wasn't the arrogant employer she'd built her anger around. He was just human, flawed and failing, and finally seeing clearly. "Julian, don't." He stepped back. "Don't forgive me. I don't deserve it. Just tell me what you need from me to make this acquisition work. I'll do it." "Whatever you say," should have felt triumphant. Instead, she felt something dangerous stir inside her. Something that recognized the wounds he carried, because she carried her own. "The restructuring plan requires major changes. It won't be easy. I know. You'll have to trust me. Completely." His eyes met hers, and in them she saw surrender, desperation, and something else. Something that made her breath catch. "I already do," he said softly, and that's when Clara realized the worst thing possible had happened. She still cared that night. Her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "There's something you should know about Robert Lawson. Meet me tomorrow. Come alone. A friend." Clara stared at the message, ice sliding down her spine. The coffee shop was deliberately public, crowded with morning rush. Clara spotted her immediately. A woman in her 50s, elegant and watchful, nursing an espresso. "You came." The woman gestured to the empty chair. "Smart, I'm Margaret Chen. I used to work for Robert Lawson. Used to. Until I learned what he really does." Margaret slid a folder across the table. "That acquisition you're managing? It's not a rescue. It's a calculated destruction. Lawson targets struggling companies, promises salvation, then strips them for parts. The employees lose everything. The communities lose their anchor, and Lawson walks away richer." Claire's hands felt numb as she opened the folder. Documents, emails, a pattern spanning years. Companies acquired, dismantled, destroyed. Lives ruined methodically, legally, profitably. Why are you telling me this? Because you still have time to stop it. The final contracts aren't signed. Blake Industries can still walk away. Margaret's eyes were hard. But you need to decide whose side you're on. Clara thought of Julian's surrender. His trust. His raw, desperate hope that she was different from everyone who had abandoned him. She thought of Robert's kindness, the opportunities he'd given her, the life she'd built from nothing. If I expose this, I lose everything I've gained? Yes. And if I don't, then you become exactly what you hated about Julian. Someone who puts profit over people. Clara left the folder on the table and walked out, her world tilting sideways. She went straight to Julian's office. He looked up from his desk, surprise, and something warmer flickering across his face. Clara, I didn't expect we need to talk. No. She closed the door. And you need to listen very carefully. She told him everything. Watched his face go from confusion to horror to rage. Lawson played us both, he said finally, his voice hollow. He used you to get to me, and he used me to keep you compliant. There's still time to back out. We can void the contracts, find another solution, and you. Julian stood, moving around the desk toward her. What happens to you when Lawson realizes you betrayed him? I'll figure it out. No. His hand caught her arm, gentle but firm. You'll lose everything you built. Your career, your reputation, everything you fought for. I know. Why? His eyes searched hers desperately. Why would you sacrifice all of that for me? After everything I did to you? Clara felt the truth rise up, terrifying and inevitable. Because somewhere between hating you and saving you, I started seeing you. The real you. And I can't let someone destroy that, even if it costs me everything. The air between them went electric. Julian's hand slid from her arm to her face, cradling it like something precious and breakable. You're extraordinary, he whispered, and I'm still the man who treated you like nothing.
You were.
But people change. I've seen it. Clara, the door burst open. Robert Lawson stood there, fury carved into every line of his face. Behind him, security guards. I had such high hopes for you, Robert said, his voice cold as winter. But you just couldn't resist playing hero, could you? You lied. Clara stepped away from Julian, facing Robert directly. You built your empire on destruction. I built my empire on opportunity. Those companies were going to fail anyway. I simply profited from inevitability. He smiled, sharp and cruel. And now, you'll learn what happens to people who betray me. The contracts aren't signed yet, Julian said. You can't force the acquisition, can't I? Robert pulled out his phone, turned it toward them. On the screen, documents, Clara's signature. Dated from this morning. Your dear Clara signed the final authorization 2 hours ago? Or did you think I'd let her run around unsupervised? Clara felt the floor drop out from under her. I never signed. Digital signatures are so easy to fabricate. And you were so careful to give me access to all your files, so trusting. Robert's smile widened. It's done, Blake. Your company is mine. And Clara, you're fired. Again, security will escort you both out. Julian lunged forward. The guards grabbed him, holding him back as he struggled. I'll fight this, he shouted. I'll expose everything. With what evidence? Your word against mine? A disgraced businessman and a housekeeper playing corporate. Robert shook his head. You're finished. Both of you. The elevator down, Julian and Clara stood in stunned silence. The guards had released them at the ground floor. Their job done. I'm sorry, Clara whispered. I tried to save you, and I destroyed everything. Julian turned to her, and in his eyes she saw not anger, but something fierce and determined. No, he said, you gave me something I'd lost. You gave me something worth fighting for. He took her hand. And I know exactly what to do next. What? We go to war. Julian's apartment was smaller than his mansion had been, cluttered with papers and coffee cups. 2 weeks of desperate planning had led to this moment. Margaret found 3 other executives Lawson screwed over. They're willing to testify. Clara pinned another document to the board they'd built, and the forensic accountant confirmed the signature forgery. Still not enough. Julian ran his hands through his hair. We need something bigger. Something undeniable. Clara's phone buzzed. She glanced at it, froze, then looked up with wild eyes. Julian. One of Lawson's current employees just sent me something. Internal emails. He's planning to do to his own company what he did to yours. Asset stripping. He's been embezzling for years. Why would someone inside risk? Because people are tired of being treated as disposable. Clara met his eyes. Sound familiar? They had 24 hours before the final Blake Industries transfer. 24 hours to gather everything, contact the authorities, and pray the legal system moved fast enough. Clara didn't sleep. Neither did Julian. They worked side by side through the night, building their case document by document. Somewhere around 3 in the morning, she felt his hand cover hers. Thank you, he said quietly. For fighting? For not giving up. On the company. On me, I'm not who I was when I cleaned your floors. No, you're who you always were. I was just too blind to see it. Turned her hand over, traced her palm gently. When this is over, whatever happens, I want you to know something. What? You changed my life that night at the dinner. Not because you embarrassed me. Because you showed me what courage actually looks like. His voice cracked. And I've been falling for you ever since, even when I was too broken to admit it. Clara felt tears burn behind her eyes. Julian, I don't expect anything. I just needed you to know. The courtroom was packed. Press in the back, investors on the sides, Robert Lawson at the defendant's table, looking perfectly confident. Until Clara walked in with Julian. Beside her and a legal team behind them. Robert's face went white. The evidence was overwhelming. Testimony from Margaret Chen. Documents from the whistleblower. Forensic proof of forgery and embezzlement. The judge's face grew harder with each revelation. Mr. Lawson, the judge said finally, I'm issuing an immediate injunction against the Blake Industries acquisition. Furthermore, I'm ordering a full criminal investigation into your business practices. The courtroom erupted. Robert turned to stare at Clara, fury and disbelief warring in his eyes. She stared back, unflinching. Outside, the afternoon sun felt impossibly bright. Julian's company was safe. Damaged, but salvageable. Robert Lawson was facing criminal charges. It should have felt like victory. What now? Clara asked, suddenly exhausted. Julian looked at her for a long moment. Then he did something she never expected. He knelt. Clara, I can't offer you what you deserve. My company is a mess. I'm a mess. But I can offer you partnership. Real partnership. Not as employee and employer. As equals, he pulled out a folder. 50% ownership of Blake Industries. And if you'll have me, a chance to build something actually worth building. Clara stared at the documents. At this man who had once commanded her silence, now offering her everything. Get up, she said softly. He stood, uncertainty flickering across his face. I don't want partnership because you feel guilty. I want it because you see me as capable. I do. God, Clara, you're the most capable person I've ever met. Then yes, she took the folder. On one condition, anything. We do it right this time. No shortcuts. No sacrificing people for profit. We build something that actually matters. Agreed. They shook hands formally. Then Julian smiled, tentative and genuine. So, partner, what's our first move? Clara felt something light and fierce unfurl in her chest. 3 years ago, she had been invisible, voiceless, small. Now she stood in the sun with power in her hands and a man beside her who had learned to see her as she truly was. Not a housekeeper. Not a conquest. Not a means to an end. An equal. We rebuild, she said. Together. Julian stepped closer. And maybe, someday, we build something else too? She knew what he was asking. Knew the risks of mixing business with something more. Knew all the ways it could go wrong. She also knew that every meaningful thing in life required risk. Maybe, she said, allowing herself a smile, but you'll have to earn it. I intend to spend the rest of my life trying. They walked toward their future side by side. Two scarred souls who had found redemption not in perfection, but in the messy, complicated work of becoming better. The mansion was sold. The old life, gone. In its place, something harder and truer, something built on respect instead of power, partnership instead of possession. Clara looked back once at the courthouse where they'd won, then forward at the city spreading before them. She had started as someone's housekeeper. She had become her own person, and that, she realized, was the only victory that mattered. 6 months later, Blake Industries announced its first community initiative, a foundation supporting workers' rights and corporate accountability. Clara stood at the podium, Julian beside her. As they announced their commitment to doing business differently in the front row, Margaret Chen smiled. Robert Lawson watched from prison, the news playing on a small television, and Clara spoke with the same clear voice that had once broken the silence at a dinner table, the voice that had refused to be quieted, the voice that had changed everything. We believe businesses exist for more than profit, she said. They exist for people. The applause was thunderous. Julian's hand found hers behind the podium. Squeezed once, she squeezed back. Some stories end with revenge, some with romance, some with triumph. This one ended with something rarer. Transformation. Two broken people who learned to build something beautiful from their scars. The end.